Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, I recently had the pleasure of being one of the first people outside of Blizzard themselves to get my own hands-on with the Spiritborn, the new class being added to Diablo 4 with the Vessel of Hatred expansion. And first things first, thank you so much to Blizzard for bringing me in and inviting me for this. They were all just absolutely lovely people, and I gotta say, getting to talk to some of the people behind the game personally left me with a lot more confidence in both their passion and ability to continue to fix this game over time, compared to just, hearing the relatively scripted answers that they have to give on streams. That said, that's not why you're here. We can talk about the non-Spiritborn related stuff another time. You're here right now because I have something you want. Spiritborn gameplay that you have not seen, and the first-hand experience of getting to play it myself. And let's just say that I may have slightly broken things a little bit while I was using it, even though we weren't locked to playing it only level 30. Like, literally, I did crash the game at one point just because of a specific combination of skills that I was trying to work together. But also, once I actually got this to function, well, you can see what's on your screen right now. So before we get into what I did specifically to make the class feel as good as it did to me personally, let's talk about what the class actually is, how it functions, and what it feels like comparatively to the rest of the options that we have currently in Diablo 4. The Spiritborn is easiest explained starting with its most unique part, its class mechanic, which is the Spirit Hall. In this menu, you will pick a primary and secondary Spirit Guardian to follow. These are the sort of gods of the spirit realm that you call upon with your various abilities to enhance you and assist you in combat. The four that you have access to in-game are the centipede, which is all based around dealing poison damage in both typical and quite interesting new ways, including ways of interacting with thorns, which is extremely cool in my opinion. And the big new thing the centipede focuses around as well is lifesteal as a mechanic, which is a stat that is otherwise only currently available on one item in the game, Andariel's Visage, a mythic unique. But with this guardian in this class, you can actually get a pretty silly amount of lifesteal percentage on your damage, which makes you incredibly tanky, honestly. Then there is the Jaguar Guardian, which is focused mostly on giving you lots of attack speed and sort of lunging forwards with a lot of its attacks to have good momentum on melee moves, and this also works around consuming other debuffs, and the Jaguar abilities were also the ones that I saw interacting most with cooldown reductions and resets, which I found quite interesting too. This had a focus on fire damage specifically as well, and then there is the Gorilla Guardian, which is focused all around giving you damage reduction and turning the damage that you take into damage that you deal, either by having a focus on a more active Thorn style playstyle, directly using your Thorn stat as a scaler for some damage abilities, or in some cases you have skills that will do things like reduce their cooldown when you get hit by an enemy, sort of increasing your damage in a secondary way by letting you cast your skills more often. Then the final Guardian is the Eagle, which is home to some of the most super mobile abilities of the class, including having some actual medium to long range attack options to allow the Spiritborn to be a fair bit more versatile than only having a melee focus. Eagle attacks are generally lightning element based, and the Eagle also has a reasonably high focus on both vulnerable application and critical effects. So honestly, most builds will have at least a bit of the Eagle in them because of that. That said, the way these Guardians work within the class itself then is that every skill is by default associated with one of the four, because its effects fall within one of those sort of categories. The Spirit Hall lets you choose one primary Guardian and one secondary Guardian. Each one has its own bonus effect that it unlocks if you have it in either of the slots. The Eagle bonuses tend to focus around Storm Feathers, which are a sort of specific attack type localized to Eagle skills. Jaguar focuses around stacks of the new Ferocity buff, which gives you bonus attack speed for every stack that you have. Gorilla has a hefty focus on another new stacking buff for the class called Resolve, which gives you a huge pile of damage reduction for every single stack you have, to the point that a Gorilla-focused Spiritborn build might well be the highest potential for survivability in the game, depending on unknown changes to other classes, of course. Then the Centipede bonuses are focused around lifesteal, poison, and the Pestilent Swarm mechanic, which, like the Storm Feathers of the Eagle, is somewhat of a unique thing to Centipede skills. Your primary Guardian, on top of the regular effect that I've just mentioned, will also make every single skill that the Spiritborn has gain the skill tag of that Guardian. For example, by default, every skill is tagged with one Guardian that matches them the most, and there are passives that affect skills based on their tags, legendary aspects, uniques, things like that, all kinds of that. Your primary Guardian slot doesn't replace the base tag of a skill. Interestingly, it actually adds on top of them, meaning if you have Eagle as your primary Guardian and you use a Jaguar skill, it will count as both an Eagle and Jaguar skill at the exact same time. This opens up a hell of a lot of possibilities when creating builds, especially as we were given some slight sneak peeks at a couple of unique helmets for the class, one that gives you bonuses for having matching primary and secondary Guardian choices in your Spirit Hall, and one that does the opposite by giving all skills your secondary Guardian skill tag, as well well as your primary one, which means that a skill could have 3 tags at once, opening up a whole lot of potential synergy. That aside, that's all honestly a bit complex. It's a bit deep. There's a lot of stuff to get into, but what is important to grasp at first glance from all of this is that there's just an immense amount of variety and adaptability within the Spiritborn class. From the class mechanic alone, there are 16 different combinations of primary and secondary guardian, and thus 16 different potential playstyles from that alone, before considering the ways of different configurations of skills within this, and different legendaries, uniques, paragon boards, all that type of stuff. And as such, in our gameplay journey, they gave us 4 different presets, one focused on each of the different guardians as their main sort of patron. Of course, to start off with, I tried each of these templates that they gave us to just sort of get a handle on it and feel for what's actually going on at the base level. Starting with Eagle, because I thought the sound of high mobility and ranged attacks was really interesting, and it lived up to it incredibly well. Soar is a new movement ability that throws you around the battlefield. There's a Vortex ability that you can use to actively pull enemies in around you and group them up. There's a ranged cone core attack with the Eagle as well. There's just lots of ways really to sort of dash around the battlefield and hit enemies that are honestly nowhere close to you. To me, this felt most similar to a ranged rogue type build in the current live game, but honestly just far more mobile than that, though again this was a relatively short first glance at a low level with only a couple of legendaries and no uniques. After that, I wanted to try out the Gorilla template because I found the idea of a concept fully based around reducing damage intake and turning that around right at the enemy to be really neat if it's done right. I'm someone who used to play tanks a lot in MMOs, and to put it simply, it just had an immense and immediate amount of survivability. The ultimate for the Gorilla basically just locks off an area and makes it entirely uninhabitable for enemies while it's active, while also making you tankier while you're standing in that circle. It has the ability to genuinely control its own output by directing Thorns damage through active skills, which I really like. But to me, this one felt a little bit underpowered at level 30, and I don't consider that a surprise at all, honestly. Survivability isn't really what you want most at level 30, and we had about 500 Thorns on our actual starter build, which is basically nothing compared to a proper Thorns focused setup at a higher level, of course. That said, I could just feel from the abilities and the way that they are actually worded that at max level in a proper build with a proper Thorn setup, something like Razorblade on, and this Guardian as a focus will probably get really quite nasty, but also in a totally different way to what the Eagle could do. After that, I went to the Jaguar pre-made template, and this one felt exactly how it was advertised too, incredibly mobile, lots of quick attacks, and even multi-strikes too, as a result of some interesting interactions, such as one of the skills, if you use it 3 times in a row, would have just a bunch of extra strikes that would happen when you did it. And the Jaguar ultimate ability, I think, felt the best by far too, which was a leaping forward attack where the Jaguar would then dance and damage in a circle around you for a couple of seconds before disappearing again. But any enemy that died while this effect was active had a 15% chance of resetting the cooldown of this ultimate and increasing the number of hits that it did the next time you used it, which stacked up to 4 times, doing more and more hits the more that you got the reset. So clearly, the full intention of this ultimate is for it to keep resetting as you walk from pack of enemy to pack of enemies, making it stronger and stronger each time. And it honestly felt really good. Then the final template that I tried was Centipede. From talking to the other creators at the event, this is the one that most people spent the most time with. The poison damage, the lifesteal, the pestilent swarm mechanic, really neat. And a lot of the abilities just make poisoned enemies drop pestilent swarms, which are essentially a poison damage projectile, and the way that they'll move is decided by the skill that procs it, or legendary aspects that you have can change it. Sometimes they'll rotate in a circle around their spawn point, sometimes they'll fly forward in a straight line. This is clearly a really big part of the Centipede Guardian setup that will be affected massively by legendary aspects and uniques. And I think conceptually you should think of this sort of like stun grenades for rogues, a unique mechanic to the class that is triggered by multiple skills and scaled in a different way to most other things, while still connecting every skill that procs it to each other in a synergistic way. That said, there were 2 things that I tried past that. When I started to get a bit more comfortable with the base concepts, of course I went into trying to make my own builds from the skill tree we had. The first thing that I wanted to do was mix Gorilla and Centipede, and holy crap, the survivability of that was completely ludicrous. So much damage reduction, then you add the lifesteal on top of that, you couldn't die. But for pretty obvious reasons, that didn't make it very good at level 30. But again, I think that combo will scale insanely well into later game builds. So instead of that, I went the polar opposite for a focus on level 30, with a mix of Jaguar and Eagle skills. There are ways to build this combo specifically so that you can actually apply and consume assume vulnerable as a debuff to do more damage and remove it from enemies specifically, just to apply it again, then do the same on repeat, which is actually a really neat concept, I think. But what I wanted to dive really deep into was the cooldown resetting part of the Jaguar's ultimate, because I found it by far the most entertaining aspect of the class that I'd found, and after some time looking through the skill tree, I was starting to put together a bit of an idea with it. Jaguar ultimate resets itself all the time just by killing things while it's active. There's a passive skill in the ultimate tree that takes a little bit of investment to actually reach, but what this one does is make it so after you cast your ultimate skill, you can freely cast the last skill that you used before it for up to 3 seconds. That means if a skill has a cooldown or a resource cost, for those 3 seconds, it doesn't trigger any of that. Then the final piece came from Razor Wings, an eagle potency skill. This skill has 3 charges by default, and there's a fun enhancement for it called Invasive Razor Wings that makes it only usable if you have all 3 charges, and makes it fire out all 3 charges at the same time in a spiral of feathers around you. Normally this would mean a super long cooldown, as you have to wait for all 3 charges to come back before you can press it, but that's the beauty of where my creation was headed. Approach a pack of enemies, use Razor Wings, all 3 charges, use the Jaguar ult, which then lets me literally just spam Razor Wings for 3 seconds straight, sending a ridiculous amount of feathers spiraling out in every direction, killing everything on the screen, which then obviously increases your chances of resetting the Jaguar cooldown because it's a 15% chance on kill. I realized that if I stopped spamming before the 3 seconds ended as well, it wouldn't put the skills on cooldown either. Then there was a 15% chance to reset the Jaguar ult, of course, which would then trigger the vast majority of the time through regular dungeon clearing style content or anything that had any sort of enemy density at all. And of course, again, this was level 30. Enemy density increases and increases and increases as you go to higher level content, so this would only become more reliable. And again, if you don't overcommit and hit the ult when only one enemy is live, something like that, the cooldown resetting will persist, meaning you can clear a pack with 1 cycle of this and have everything still off cooldown before you reach the next pack. Of course, this didn't have the greatest single target potential, as there's no way to reset the cooldowns of this without kills, but this was using literally 2 of the abilities on my bar, which means your entire core skill setup can be set to deal with single target, like using the centipede core skill Stinger to build up loads of poison damage, which was what I ended up doing, and I then just used the other slots on my bar for the utility of Soar as a movement skill and Vortex to group enemies up. And every once in a while, I would just have a combo moment where my screen would light up with this gorgeous sea of storm feathers that would look so freaking cool, and I would just audibly chuckle to myself with like a childlike glee, almost forgetting that I was in a room with about 40 other people in that moment, all trying to basically try out the same class. All of this to say, the Spiritborn is goddamn fun. There are so many different ways to build this, even at level 30. The animations for it are gorgeous, and even without seeing any of the Paragon board, without using any uniques and barely any legendary aspects, just the base mechanics at place with the class are focused on variety above all else, and the few uniques that we were told about match that entirely. Not to mention that I was able to achieve a massive amount of power extremely quickly with the class, and a build that is far from complete. It was basically just one idea that I didn't even fully flesh out because I didn't have enough time to do so. Now, that said, no matter which of the 4 guardians appeal to you, or any combination of them within that, there will be a viable playstyle in endgame for Spiritborn that fits it. I can nearly guarantee that just from the sheer amount of different avenues for power that the class visibly has already. Of course, the first concern with that is, well, what about the other pre-existing classes? And my complete honest opinion is that Spiritborn is the most fun class that I have played at level 30 in Diablo 4, and it isn't even remotely close. That said, there are 2 things to keep in mind from that statement. The first being that, again, we were level 30. Things change at a higher level and in inordinate amount, and through my experience, though, the classes don't generally get less fun as you get further in, so that is a good sign. The second, though, being that this is a class being added with the Vessel of Hatred expansion, and while we know for a fact that a lot of changes and even additions like new skills will be coming to the already 5 pre-existing classes as well when this expansion happens, we simply don't know what these changes are going to be quite yet. Right now, comparing the other classes on live servers in Season 4 to the Spiritborn, it feels like it's in a whole other league of enjoyment, but until we see the changes that are going to be made to the other classes, we just won't know if that's just Spiritborn being super special, or if the changes made with Vessel of Hatred will make every class feel just as good. So all I can really say on that is if they make the other classes feel the way that Spiritborn felt, the game will be in an immaculate state, because it just felt really genuinely good to play. Simple as that, no better way to put it. One vital note before I put a cap on things for today, because I could go on for hours probably about things that are probably way too minute for the vast majority of you to care even a little bit, but a lot of us did notice that in our test build, the Paragon board wasn't accessible until level 60, rather than level 50, which is what it currently is in the live game. And while this could have just been a unique part of us being on a game build that was made only for this test, or it could be an indication of a larger shift to the level progression of the game that will be coming with the Vessel of Hatred expansion. I don't really have further speculations on that, I just wanted to point out that that was a thing. That just about does it for today then, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow probably with more info, including changes coming for Season 5 long before this expansion hits, as well as some more abstract details on the Spiritborn and the expansion in general, as while we were playing the Spiritborn mainly, we did also get to spend some time in Nahantu. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and if you have any questions about the class, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and if it's something that I'll allow to answer, then I will try to do so tomorrow. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.